Okay.
Welcome, both of you.
Thank you.
Now, Ricardo joined us. Welcome,
Okay.
Ricardo.
Hi.
Hello, Ricardo.
So, hello again, everyone watching. This is our 5th Buddha Talk Hotspot, where we invite guests from different countries to talk about the current crisis, the ongoing crisis. Today is the 25th of April, and we are really concerned how you are doing, and hopefully we can share a little bit how we can deal with the situation and also to use it as a chance of development. Today with us is the Venerable Thubten Chodron from the United States. And again with us is Bhikshuni Jampa Tsedroen from Hamburg, better known as Dr. Carola Roloff. And also Ricardo from Spain. His surname is Guerrero. And Ricardo is the director of the Buddhist Association or Hispanic Buddhist Association. So today we are an interesting mixture of half Theravada tradition and half Tibetan tradition, which seems to be almost the course of this meeting. We tried also to invite Zen representatives, but so far we mainly are from Theravada and Tibetan tradition. And so I want to introduce myself shortly. My name is Raimund Hopf. I'm a Buddhist teacher here in Hamburg, responsible for the Sutanta group and also for the Buddha Talk, the platform where we actually gonna release this video. And I'm the chairman of the new organization Mitgefühl in Aktion, who is a sister of the American organization Buddhist Global Relief. And I invited my guests in the name of Mitgefühl in Aktion because we also want to remind us and every one of you that there is, in the ongoing current crisis, is a future crisis which we are not so familiar with mainly, which is that people in areas where there is malnutrition are now in desperate need of supply. And if you have any chance to help, please turn to any organization who is currently helping in with projects fighting malnutrition. I thank you in advance for that. So now I would like to ask the Venerable Thubten Chodron to start with a short homage. Welcome.
Okay. Thank you. So I'll just recite the 4 immeasurables known as the 4 Brahma Viharas that are common to the to all of the Buddhist traditions. Yeah. So through them we can set our motivation. May all sentient beings have happiness and its causes. May all sentient beings be free of suffering and its causes. May all sentient beings never be separated from sorrowless bliss. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger. And so with that, may we make the welfare of all sentient beings our chief concern and our aspiration to attain full awakening, so that we can be of the greatest benefit. And do this by following our 3 refuges of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha.
Anumodana. Thank you.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
I will now light a candle of compassion and invite you to join me in a minute of silence and good wishes, listening to the singing ball. Thank you very much. So since 3 of us have been on recordings of previous talks, I would just want to ask Carola to introduce our special guest from the United States, Venerable Thubten Chodron.
Yeah, will be my pleasure. I could say many things, but to make it brief, the Venerable Thubten Chodron was born in California, close to Los Angeles, and she's one of the most famous Buddhist authors and teachers today. During the last years, she also co-authored a series of books together with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, published with Wisdom Publications. And this series started with the volume Buddhism, One Teacher, Many Traditions, a book which is extremely helpful to understand what the various traditions of Buddhism have in common and where they differ. The Venerable Chodron became a Buddhist nun in 1977. She graduated from the University of California and did graduate work in education at the University of Southern California. And I believe it is due to this combination of being trained as a school teacher in the West, her natural talent to teach, and her profound interest in and knowledge and experience of the practice of Buddhism that led to the fact that her Tibetan teachers made her quite easily traveling to teach the Dharma worldwide, not only to Western people, but also in Asia. And finally, in 2003, Venerable Chodron founded Shravasti Abbey, a Buddhist abbey in Newport, Washington. And there she is functioning as the abbess since then for 17 years now. And the community and the abbey itself are continuously growing. It's a lovely place. You should visit it one day. And the US for monastic, in the US for monastic training, according to the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, it is the only place, at least known to me, where especially Western women can train and live as a Buddhist nun. Actually, we also sent Buddhist women here from Europe for training to the US, to the Shravasti Abbey. And I guess that Venerable Chodron has a lot to say how to deal with conflicts and crises in general, and especially with our shared situation in the Corona crisis.
So I would like to invite you to tell a little bit about your work and how you experience the current situation around your environment in your monastery and the Buddhist and also social world around you.
Okay. I guess I need to start with saying we have a very good situation here in terms of the lockdown, a good situation that most people in the country don't have. So that brings also, as His Holiness says, when you have a privilege, you also have a responsibility. But we live on quite a large piece of land, of forest and meadow. And so with the lockdown and shelter in place, we don't receive guests during this period. And we don't leave, except one nun goes to town every 2 weeks for errands. And since the beginning of the Abbey, we've had the policy of we don't go and buy our own food. So we only eat what people offer us. But the people in town have, in Spokane, which is the biggest city near us, they have a system of, buying food and then bringing it up here and offering it to the community. So we don't even have to go out for that. And the kindness of the lay people who support us is really tremendous. But what we have to offer, because I feel like having this very good situation we have, where I don't think we're in any danger because we don't go out, people don't come in. It brings the responsibility, and also, since love and compassion are a very strong part of our practice, to enact our practice in some way in this crisis. And so I see that as, giving advice to people. So we have a thing called the BBC, not the British BBC. Our BBC is the Bodhisattva Breakfast Corner.
Oh.
And so it's short talks that we give every day before lunch. It used to be before breakfast, but we changed it to before lunch. And so a lot of those talks have to do now with the coronavirus crisis. We've been doing this for years and years, so we have a whole backlog of talks about, all sorts of Dharma topics. But now we're really focusing on how to help people directly, because people are, their anxiety level is, as you know, way up. They're freaking out, they're afraid, they're confused. You people in Europe, I think, have it a little better because you have some political leaders that are sane, and we have a president who has some difficulties. Day before yesterday, he suggested that people may want to inject or imbibe disinfectant to counteract the virus. And then, of course, when that didn't go over so well, he said he was being sarcastic, but we don't really think so. So this is a whole new level in the States of you have the Trump presidency combined with the coronavirus crisis, and the two together are unbelievable. Yeah, totally unbelievable. So I could go on and on about that, but I want to share the platform and not monopolize it. But I must say, because you're a student of Bhikkhu Bodhi, who I admire tremendously.
Thank you.
It's so encouraging because both he and I speak out about social issues quite a bit. And I don't know about him, but I get flack for it. And people will write and say, "You're a Buddhist nun, what are you doing talking about these things?" And I respond saying, for me, this is not a political issue, this is a moral issue. This is an ethical issue. I have to speak about it. And then they say, "No, you're talking politics. You should just pray and not be involved in the world." And then I think of what His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, which is, prayer is not enough. We need action.
Exactly.
But it's so interesting, people's idea of what monastics should be and do. Yeah. And anyway, I do what I do, and the people who don't like it just write letters. And then they go to other teachers. But I feel like it's, for me, Dharma practice includes my whole life and everything in it. I mean, my Buddhist worldview affects everything that I encounter. So, we have to talk about what's going on in society.
Carola wanted to say something. I saw her hand.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to ask something. In last week, our classes at university started, and in one of my courses next time, we want to discuss what Buddhism has to offer to solve crises, and not only Corona crisis, but crisis, all different kind of crises. And I was just wondering, I mean, I can easily think about mindfulness and how mindfulness training and meditation may be helpful, but this is something also the so-called secular Buddhism is offering nowadays to all the people, and it can benefit everybody, whether Buddhist or not. But then I was wondering, I mean, what else do we have? What can you think about what Buddhism has to offer to deal with crisis? I was checking, and you said before, well, here in Shravasti Abbey, because people are not coming in and we are not going out, there's no danger. And this reminded me that the Tibetan translation of crisis is Nyenka Chenpo, great danger. So this is how they translate crisis into Tibetan. Actually, crisis, I think, is not a Buddhist term. I don't think we have a term for it in Sanskrit or Pali, or I mean, it's a question of nowadays of definition. But how do you understand crisis from a Buddhist perspective, and what do you think are the best tools we have in our toolbox of Buddhism to solve these kind of fears and problems?
Yeah. Okay. Well, just to outline them briefly, first of all, how to deal with anxiety and fear. Dharma has a lot to offer that way. How to calm your mind, and not just mindfulness ways of calming the mind, but the actual teachings. Also, how to deal with anger and judgment, because in a crisis situation, a lot of people not only get fearful and anxious, but they get angry as well. And then third is all of our teachings on compassion, which are so necessary during a time like this. So those are the three things that off the top of my head come to mind, what we can offer. And although we speak about, they're Buddhist, we learn these teachings from the Buddha, we can share them with people of all faiths and of no faith, because they're basic common sense on how to work with the mind. And we don't need to talk about, use a lot of Pali and Sanskrit words. We can just talk about, the human experience and how to deal with fear and anxiety, how to deal with anger and judgment, how to cultivate compassion for everybody in the situation.
I would like to come back to you mentioning that you are rather outspoken about the current situation in the United States politically, and
no, not politically. I don't speak on a political platform. Mm-hmm. And in the U.S., as you know, with the tax status, we are not allowed to endorse any candidates for any kind of office, but we are encouraged to talk about actual situations from an ethical viewpoint. Okay?
Exactly. Mm.
So I don't speak on politics. Sorry, I had to interrupt you there.
No, that's fine. No, you are right. You said you are talking about ethical subjects, but the interesting thing is I'm translating Pali into German, and funny is then that there are these 4 dangers often mentioned, and it starts with danger by kings, danger by robbers, danger by fire, danger by water. And I always find it very curious that the king is the first. And my reading of the old text is that the Buddha was actually very much engaged in speaking towards injustice or towards, he was talking with kings a lot. One time he was asked how how the criminal rate could be reduced. And he actually suggested give them loans and food so that people live again with open houses. And in a way, for me, it's rather the opposite question. How can we not engage and talk about ethical and social situation? I mean, that's why we're also doing this talk, of course. I think we very much have to do that. We are not separate from it, so to say, right?
Yeah,
well,
quite definitely.
Can you tell us a little bit how you are going forward in addressing ethical question in your society? Especially, you mentioned the policy of your president. How can you address that from a Buddhist standpoint and from standpoint of ethics?
Well, we talk about the 5 precepts, and how the precepts are not coming from somebody else, being put on us as, commandments that we have to follow, but just looking at when we follow the 5 precepts, our own lives are more peaceful, how our relationships with other people are better, how we affect society improves. And so ethics is something, that benefits people. And I present it in that way because I'm not sure in Europe, but at least in the US, people are very resistant to authority. I mean, we have a strange thing with authority. On one hand, we worship, on the other hand, we disdain it. But yeah, we're quite extremist in this country. But, if you say thou shalt not do this, at least to the people who are inquiring about Buddhism and people just in general society, it doesn't work to present things as hard and fact laws that are coming from some kind of external divinity. It makes more sense to present it in a more common sense psychological way so that people can see the benefits of keeping ethical conduct. Yeah. And so it's so funny because our president is such a good example of how to make ethical mistakes. And I really tried hard not to talk about him and use him as an example. But he's such a perfect example of it. Yeah. So, especially about the speech one and telling the truth. I noticed when he was first elected, the press would say about things that his speech was inaccurate. Yeah. And it just needed to be tweaked a little bit. And then as more and more time went on, they did more fact checks and saw that the things he said were false. So the press stepped up and started calling them falsities. And now people in the press are calling them outright lies. So it's interesting for me, to step back and see when somebody lies, what are the effects on themselves karmically? What are the effects on the people around them? What are the effects on the broader society in the country? So for me, it's an incredible study in, if I just take that one precept, of the value of keeping the precepts. Yeah. And then, after that, because you're focusing on the behavior of the person, not saying that the person themselves is awful. You know, you're speaking about the behavior, not judging the person. So then after that, you know, cultivating compassion for somebody who uncontrollably finds it difficult to adhere to basic ethical values that are propounded by all spiritual traditions and also by secular society. You know, so how to cultivate compassion for somebody like that, yeah, instead of judgment and anger.
Would you be ready to go, for instance, not at the moment, of course, but somehow, would you join a demonstration that would have the purpose to address these issues in the society and call for more ethical and judge policies?
It depends on the situation. I'm not somebody who likes to go to rallies and demonstrations so much. I did go to one when, okay, I need to back up. The reason I don't like to go to big things, because the only huge event with many people I will go to is His Holiness's teachings. You know, why? Because there people are coming together. The motivation is to create virtue. I don't like being in a crowd that is angry. Yeah, and many rallies and demonstrations, people are shouting, people are angry. That's not my style. Yeah, I don't feel comfortable with that. So I, you know, would participate more in like panel discussions like this, or giving talks in different places, or interfaith dialogue, rather than demonstrations and rallies.
Thank you. Ricardo, please feel free to ask anything to Venerable Chodron.
No, I was listening to Venerable Chodron. First of all, I have to say thank you, Raimund, for organizing these kind of things.
Thank you for joining again.
Thank you for letting me join these venerable masters from whom you can learn so much. Well, I would like to underline that this in Europe, at least, we haven't experienced this a crisis like this since, except the Balkans, since the Second World War. Yeah. And this is very new for most of the people. In a certain point, nearly 2 months ago, we had to stop everything. In this life that usually we live so fast, we had to stop. Also, we are isolated in this society of communication, of relationships, of interconnections, and so on. So most of people, I can notice that we are feeling lost. What to do, how to react, what it is supposed must be our behavior, and so on. So I would like to go back to your first question, what Buddhism can offer in this crisis. At least in Spain, I suppose, in other Western countries, Buddhism doesn't exist as a whole. In the same way that we can speak about the church, the Catholic Church of whatever. So we are here, you cannot find a Buddhist answer or offer, but Buddhists speaking about people. So I can receive some questions. I'm sure that Venerable Chodron, Venerable Dr. Carola also, I'm sure you are receiving a lot of questions from individuals. What to do, how to react. So in this way, I find that this crisis can suppose an opportunity for Buddhism, because Buddhism is a philosophy, is a personal practice above all.
Yeah,
it's a practice of personal development. Of course, society is there, but the Buddha taught us that the change in society would come from the change in the individuals, in people. So when I am asked about different things, I have the opportunity to teach the basics, to explain again the basics of Buddhism with this particular example. What is suffering? Which are the roots and reasons of suffering? What can we do for solving it, and so on. And people is paying attention much more than before to all these things. They are paying attention to precepts, as Venerable Chodron was saying, and the Buddha's path, and so on. So I think that we have now a very good opportunity. People is asking me about books, about texts, where they can find answers in the Pali text, in the Pali canon, and so on. So questions that I have never received from these people. So after that, something is changing. I think people also has noticed that this crisis is completely out of their hands, and people is noticing noticing that they have to make some changes in their life because they don't want it to repeat again. So after that, I suppose that we will see how we have to deal with different things, with things that we have never had to deal with until this moment.
Yeah.
This is a first approach, I think.
Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I was just thinking, Ricardo, when you said this, that probably you would say that crisis is just one case, one example for suffering, what we call suffering, right? And I mean, I think because people in this situation have a lot of time at home and they withdraw, and many who are not living in a big family, they have a lot of time to meditate if they have been trained to meditate. But there's always this danger that Buddhists are mainly seen for people who withdraw from society and get not really engaged with society. So I saw recently, I saw a nice article by Jay Garfield that was published in an online magazine of big ideas changing how the world thinks, IAI. And there he was talking about beyond the catastrophe, we might all be better people once the COVID-19 crisis has subsided. And I liked his approach by referring to the 6 parameters as we have them in the Mahayana tradition, and how to deal with our problems and with this crisis. And he says here, if I may just give me a moment to find, well, he says on the one hand, impermanence and interdependence are not mere truisms, but deep existential truths we must hold in our hearts even once this passes. And then he says, by developing an open awareness of the situation around us, we allow ourselves to become more responsive and less reactive agents of benefit, not of harm. So he refers to the 6 perfections, the 6 parameters, and starts with generosity and says it is time to be of material, emotional, and social assistance to those around us, by helping family, neighbors, communities, and institutions that find themselves in need. We ameliorate the suffering around us and reaffirm our membership in these networks that determine our own lives and those of others. We can cultivate careful attention to the needs of others, to our responses to those needs, and to our own effective states and intentions that may either contribute to or ease suffering. So I felt that, this was from a philosophical point of view a very good start. I mean, how we can really reason for getting more active and to help if we are living in cities, not in the far restricted monasteries and nunneries, but really in the middle of a city with all the people being locked down and getting now more and more nervous because of financial crisis, also not only worrying about their health, but really, that they are losing jobs and don't have the whole family is in danger, right? So, and I wonder whether we can only do something on this personal level, that we extend our help on a basic level just from one person to the other, and whether this is the Buddhist way of approach, or whether there should be also something Buddhists do together in common to share. You know, I noticed, for example, in Germany we have this Deutscher Ethikrat, the Council for Ethics of Germany, and there are a lot of theologians on the council. But I noticed that there's not one Buddhist in this council, you know, and they are all white men or women. And I thought, well, in the United States, this would be just impossible, that you have only, no people, from different races, colors, and so on, you know, just ethnics. It's, all of them white men and women, and then also from the theologies, as far as I could see, only Christianity. And this is very much the situation in Germany. And I wonder how we as Buddhists, could get more involved and more accepted also to share with others, you know. If we wait forever that somebody will ask us whether we have to offer something to it, may never happen. So I wonder whether Buddhists should become more active and how to do this. Any idea on this?
Actually, I think now, because people are communicating like we are over Zoom, that it doesn't matter whether you're in the countryside or the city, because everybody's communicating with the computer. Yeah. So I think that we can communicate a lot that way. How that will, play out after, when the lockdown is over and people can move more freely. Yeah, it's another thing. But one thing I've been thinking about is how can we as Buddhists from different traditions speak with one voice about certain ethical things. And His Holiness has mentioned that, because we're so into our own traditions and our own groups, but when something major like this happens and you need a Buddhist voice, we don't have the mechanism to do that. One thing that happened just recently is the Dharma Drum mountain people. So they have centers in the US, and they contacted us, and they contacted a few other Buddhist groups to help sponsor this, to have masks made in China, because they have links in mainland China. We have a shortage of personal protective equipment in the US. And so to start something and raise money that then could be used with their connections in China to make the masks and send them here. So, over, what was it, $500,000 was raised, masks have been sent out, and now the group is kind of saying, okay, what are we going to do next? And the way I would like to see it go is, because in previous things that have happened in the US, some of my different Dharma friends have contacted me. We want to start a petition, but we're all living in different places, and how do you contact all the people? And there's different groups. So I would like to see us, make this kind of like a central Buddhist place, so that when we want to speak together about ethical issues, because all the Buddhist traditions say the same thing. I mean, we're not talking about emptiness. We're not talking about, whether there's one vehicle or three vehicles, none of that stuff. We're talking about what's common in all the traditions, which is ethical conduct, compassion, fortitude or patience, and so to have some way when things come up where we can really communicate amongst each other, and speak with one voice. So I proposed this to the man who started this, but he's very hesitant, for this thing of, that's stepping into talking about societal issues, and maybe we shouldn't do that, okay? But, maybe we need to start somewhere with at least the people who are interested in doing that, and hopefully others will join us. I wanted to just make one more comment in regard to what you said, Ricardo, that historically, in times of crisis, people become much more interested in spirituality, because all of a sudden the 8 worldly concerns are not working for them, and they're seeing a little bit more the First Noble Truth, and so they start saying, well, what's my life about? And what have I been doing? And especially now, my life is not going to be the same after this pandemic. There's no way we can go back to living the way we lived before, but we don't know what it's going to be like. So that makes a lot of people turn to spirituality, and I think that's why you're seeing you're having so many people contact you for help, which is really wonderful, because now their minds are open, and you can share the Dharma in a new way with them.
Oh, related to this, Venerable, and trying to answer the Carola's question, you know that in our meetings of the European Buddhist Union, I always try to explain my colleagues that I think that we are making a mistake. We are importing from Asia not a way of doing things, but different ways of doing things, one becoming to a different country, to our countries in the West, with a different society, with different habits, with different behaviors, with different history, and so on. And finally, we try to fit all these ways of doing things to our society, with not very good results, I would say. So I think that in the future, and intended to give more voice to our practice, to Buddhism in the West, first of all, we would have to join forces. I think that the role of national unions have to become much more important than what they are for the moment, because we are working individually, different traditions, different schools inside traditions, and individually at the end. So we are completely powerless to reach society. What we should think about the way we are practicing Buddhism in the West. And the main question is, are we just following what we have imported from Asia, trying to impose it or trying to fit it into our societies? If so, we are making a mistake. Do we have to invent or think or develop a Western way of practice? What do you think?
Can I ask you a question?
Of course.
You said that we've been importing things and we haven't done it very well. what are the areas where you think it's not matching, it's not coming together from the East to the Western societies?
Venerable, for instance, we have been trying here to do in Spain to open a Theravada center for years with no results. The question is that the monasteries or the Theravada centers I know in Asia, in Myanmar or Sri Lanka or Thailand, are supported by people, by society. If you open a Buddhist center in Myanmar, for instance, you don't have to explain people what to do with that monastery. Everybody know what to do.
Yeah.
They have to support the monastery. They have to give support to the monks because they do their own work for the society. Here in Spain or in the West in general, we don't have the habit of doing dana. Dana is not in our daily life. It's not present in our daily life. If I finally open a Buddhist center in Spain, I have first of all to create a community in order to be sure that that community is going to support that monastery. A monastery is not an empty place. A monastery is people living inside, people with needs. And you can be sure that all those needs are going to be supported by people. Raimund.
May I jump in? I know that Carola raised her hand, but since I have to leave soon, I just take the opportunity. Actually, I want to kind of underline that a little bit, what Ricardo may mean by this, because I actually came back from Thailand being a Buddhist monk, and I had no idea how I could continue with the Vinaya, the very strict Vinaya that I had to practice there. And I just did not know how could I ever be able to live this way with a bowl and 3 robes, and my parents would not even receive me, and I wanted to take care of my dying parents. And in the end, I decided that I have to disrobe to not break the Vinaya rules, so to say. And then after being here for now 5 years back in daily life, which I actually live almost like a monk, I have to say, on my own, I'm still very secluded and very simple. And but I thought a lot about these subjects, and I have a similar observation that, and I shared that with Venerable Bhante Bodhi one day, and he also had this idea. We in the West, we actually have never come together to find how could the principles of a monastic life could be best translated into our culture. We so far, we don't dare, if you allow me to say, to even think about how could be a proper dress be in the West, in our hemisphere, so to say. While China very early adopted certain different styles of robes, very different to the Indian tradition, and Tibetans somehow very wonderfully survive in the cold with these simple robes. I'm always surprised how in the Himalayas you can actually survive, but then they are very relaxed in adapting anyway. And that would be also a question to me, to you, or it's a question on my side. If we definitely are a very small group, we have a good reputation, especially here in Germany. I feel we Buddhists have a very good reputation, but so far there's much to do. We are also not present so far in very much in social work or in aid work and so on, which, as I told you in the beginning, we started with this organization Mitgefühl and Aktion, which is a small beginning trying to bring Buddhists together, not to do religious things, but just to show that we care and share. And I think in many ways, it's true. We are very much in the beginning to translate Buddhism into our culture. And some are so fast to say, okay, let's secularize it. That's the answer. But I'm not on that page, actually. I think we have much more to offer. And I'm actually dreaming of a Buddhist community that dares to put the principles of the Dharma together with our society and offer ways of a reclusive life. I'm curious how you're living that, actually, Venerable Chodron in the United States. But here in Germany, I have to say Ricardo is right. Those little monasteries who survive are actually very cultural embedded.
Ethical monasteries.
Supported by Thai women, or supported by Sri Lankan families, or supported by Cambodian families, or whatever. But Germans don't have actually almost no real contact or no place in there. Even sometimes German monks get supported by the migrant communities of Buddhists. Yeah.
And Raimund, another side of this problem is that when newcomers, they come to our organizations, or they are just curious about Buddhism, first thing they receive when they go to a monastery or to a organization is, well, we are Theravada Buddhists, and the other are Zen, and those are Tibetan, and we are not the same. So this is the first thing they're going to receive. So of course it is quite astonishing, because they're going to escape. And we have to overcome. We have to finally overcome that.
I haven't given you a chance to answer my question, but since I have to leave soon for a new project meeting, I want to put in another question that you may continue to talk on. Just in the same line of thinking that we have now, especially when in this time where we're actually not only in one crisis, I think the world is changing very much. We have a extinction of species every day.
Yeah.
It's amazing. 200 species are dying every day, and we always thought it's somewhere. But now we see birds disappearing because they are really, certain birds we know disappeared because of certain illness. There was a fire in Australia. It's far away, but now it's right in front of our house. So to say, Niedersachsen, a state close to Hamburg, where there is a danger that because of the dryness in the woods, there might be a big danger of fire in the woods. So everything is coming close, and I'm pretty sure, I don't know how you think about it, that this world is not going to be the same anymore. And especially when the world is coming together to solve problems, I think we Buddhists have to come together and help each other and be of contribution. Or, there is no Bodhisattva heart only in Mahayana. I'm Theravadan. My heart feels the same compassion.
Of course.
Exactly.
And I'm so happy if someone speaks the truth of well-being of beings. Well-being of beings. That's
no, it's weird.
That's what I mean. So I unfortunately have to leave the discussion, but please continue. Please be not disturbed. There will be my picture on the screen because the recording goes on, and you are free to continue, and I leave it up to Carola to finish it off.
But I cannot stop the meeting then, right? Raimund, I cannot stop it then. I just let it go, right?
Yeah, you let it go. I'm still watching it from the side.
Okay.
I thank all of you, and please continue. Thank you, Untitled Chapter. Thank you. Venerable Carola.
Thank you, Raimund.
Ricardo.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Venerable Jampa, you've wanted to say something.
Yeah. I have made some notes now because it's unfortunate that Raimund is no longer with us, but actually he mentioned something, and also Ricardo, which I thought already about in the very beginning when we started and during the introduction, when Raimund said that now we have the Tibetan Buddhists and the Theravadan Buddhists here. And I thought, well, actually, we too are also hidden East Asian Buddhists because we got our full ordination from the Chinese tradition, and you are much closer in close cooperation with the Taiwanese temple in Seattle, and a constant exchange and support. And you were teaching for a long time in Singapore and have many followers also there. And so from the outside, we may look Tibetan, but from the inside, we have already changed, right? And I remember when I was asked to sign a contract in a Buddhist center to teach, Tibetan Buddhism. I said, I cannot sign this, because I cannot limit myself to Tibetan Buddhism. I want to refer to the Metta Sutta, and I want to be able and to use also Theravadan sources, early Indian sources, which I have been trained in at university. And so I think there is already a start within the European and Western Buddhist. And it reminded me also to a story, I don't know whether you remember it, but when Ricardo was talking about the national unions and the European Buddhist unions, I remember that one day you said to me, Venerable Chodron, oh, that's wonderful that you have this. We don't have this in the United States, right?
Yes.
And we have this system. I mean, we have in now, I think, 16 countries of Europe national unions, and they meet in the European Buddhist Union. And I think this is really something we have already achieved, a kind of, how do you say in English, this Ökumene, we say in German, it's the ecumenism, you say?
It is in English terms, yes, that's it. Ecumenism.
Yes,
yeah.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, also I mentioned in the beginning when I was introducing you, One Teacher, Many Traditions is the title of one of your books. And I mean, in this you also try to bridge the different traditions and to show how they relate to each other, and that they are not that different we may assume. So it seems that still there's a lot of teaching needed. So the teachers have to be a good example and stress it. And I remember that Alex Burson, whom you know very well, I mean, he wrote in one of his papers saying something like, well, it's in the West, it's not, and nowadays it's not only different traditions, but actually each teacher within each tradition is somehow to start his or her
to have their own
tradition,
center.
right? And it's not, I mean, it's more and more splitting up in so many different I mean, ways of doing things. And then there was one more thing I just wanted to throw in was when Raimund was talking about the different ways we might be able to offer for a reclusive life by having the monasteries, I felt that actually we should also have ways to offer engaged life, not only reclusive life, and how they can relate to each other. And I mean, we have I remember one journalist from Germany, from a Buddhist magazine, she asked once the Dalai Lama whether it's impossible in Europe to start monasteries, and whether this really works for the West, to have monasteries. And the Dalai Lama said, why not? I mean, I have visited so many monasteries, Christian monasteries in Europe, and they are working very well. Just have a look how they work. And then, I mean, copy them, I mean, just try to find out how are they managing, and then you have, I mean, to base it. And I think this is what happened in the different Buddhist countries. If we look into the history, I mean, they somehow linked the Buddhist concept coming from India to what already worked in their country, and how to do it. And they have these two kinds of monastic orders in the Christianity, those who live more reclusive and those who get more socially engaged. So it's already there as a pattern. And I think we should give people the freedom that not everybody has to go on the meditation cushion to become a Buddhist and to become a Buddhist monk or nun, but they could also contribute to society. Don't you think so?
And Carola, let me add just one thing. You Tibetan, you have a real advantage in comparison with the Theravadas, for instance, because you have a structure. The Dalai Lama's, all Tibetan, you recognize that he's the head of Tibetan Buddhism.
Oh, no, he's not the Pope.
He's not the Pope. Of course not. Of course, you don't have to explain, Venerable Chodron. I mean that in Theravada, for instance, every monastery is completely independent. So we
It's
have
very
even
much
less.
like that
Yes.
in Tibetan Buddhism too.
Also.
Yeah.
So this is a real advantage, disadvantage, I mean, in comparison, for instance, with the Christian monasteries. The Dalai Lama was asking, why is it possible you to have Christian monasteries and not Buddhist monasteries? This is the real difference. There is the Christian church, the Catholic church. There is a big structure of support. We don't have in Buddhism. We don't have in Buddhism. In Spain, for instance, you know that there is an agreement between the Spanish government or Italian government with the Catholic Church. And the Spanish government supports the Catholic Church. It doesn't happen with Buddhism or any other religion.
Yeah. You know what? What you're calling an advantage, I have come to see as a disadvantage. So let me just explain.
I'm just venerable, just talking about in terms of support, of course, financial support, funding, all of this.
But okay, because my experience is mostly trained in Asia, coming back here, and we set up a monastery. Where we are is an extremely conservative area of the US. No Buddhists around, really, when we came here. But let me back up just a little bit where you were saying the advantage of having this structure. In Tibetan Buddhism, they have loose groups, but actually they all run themselves in many ways. And at first, I looked at the Thai Theravadas and said, those people are so fortunate. They are accepted by the Thai monastics and supported by the Thai monastics. We, we call ourselves Injis, the Westerners, the foreigners. We are not included in the Tibetan structure. We are very definitely foreigners.
I understand.
Don't have any position. Our voices do not count. We are not included. And at the beginning, for me, this was quite painful. When I came back to the US, I began to see it as actually an advantage because we are not bound by a lot of the cultural and structural things that happen in Asia, because we're not part of that structure. So, we don't have the financial support. People in America, they have no idea what we are. People, you walk down the street and they go, Hare Krishna. They have no idea. So financially and starting things like that, you don't have the support. But you have the freedom to set things up in a way that feels comfortable to you. And I have many Theravada monastic friends, and I can really see how they're trying to take the structure in Thailand and import it to the West. And to some extent, they've been very successful with it. But it only appeals to people who like that structure and that formality. So I have a number of points here. First of all, I think it's very good that we have different people wanting to do different things because everybody has different nature and disposition. So I don't think we should even aim for one American Buddhism. I don't think it would work at all. We need all different varieties of teachers and traditions, But my experience coming here in Eastern Washington, which is very conservative, and very libertarian, it's incredible. We bought the land here. There were 3 Buddhists, We moved in. Our support depended on 3 Buddhists, And when I said we weren't going to buy any food, people looked at me and said, "You are absolutely crazy. You're going to starve." And I said, "Let's try it." Okay. So we set it up. Those three people started. We don't do it quite as formally as done in the Theravada tradition. For us, because we live, more out of the city, we don't want people to cook, drive food here, drive back. First of all, they don't have the time. They have very busy lives. Second of all, it causes so much pollution. How can we ask people to drive out and feed us every day and pollute the air more to do that? So what we do is people come, they offer food, even when we have retreats here, people come, they offer food, we cook it. Okay, so, we don't hold that thing of not chopping vegetables strictly because it's just not practical in our situation. Okay, so, but it was a real education process for us to educate people about dana, and at the same time to keep to our monastic way of we don't ask for money, we don't ask for anything. So the lay people, those three lay people, would start giving dana talks and just explaining how it works and what monastic life is and how to support it. And so slowly, people just started to contribute. One of the things that I think has really, that has been really important is, unlike Buddhist centers in the West, we don't charge for anything. Most Buddhist centers in the West, if you're going to teachings, if you're going to do a retreat, here's the fee schedule. We don't do that, okay? So people can come here, they can stay. We tell them we depend completely on donations.
No, of course, this is what we do, most of us, of course, in our organizations. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You just explain your situation and let people to do whatever they think this is right. Yeah.
And people will come forward because when you give, because when the people come, they live with us. We eat together with the lay people. We don't eat separately and then the lay people eat afterwards. We eat together. So we talk, we get to know them. They volunteer, we work together with them. Okay? And so, it's created a really wonderful relationship because we really talk about the monastery. It's the monastic's home, but it's set up for the benefit of all society.
So in a certain way, Carola and Venerable, what we are doing is adapting finally
yes,
rules and the Vinaya into our society.
Exactly.
So next step would be what to do in order to finally adapt for people to feel comfortable with the Buddhism in the West.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think first of all, I think the people who come here feel comfortable with it. It has to do with the whole feeling, if one feedback we get a lot from people is, oh, when we come to the monastery, everybody is so kind. Yeah. The monastics are so kind. And so I think because of the way of relating, then it just feels more comfortable, yeah, rather than we are monastics and, I'm sorry, I'm remembering sometimes in Thailand, when somebody wouldn't give me a glass of water because I was a woman. Mm-hmm. We don't do that kind of things. When we have counseling, we're in a room with a window where everybody can see in, but we don't have this thing of, just the uptightness about between men and women. Okay, because that's not going to fly in the West. Yeah. And the monks are always in front and the women in back, and the monks have full ordination, and the women are Siladharas, because the monks allowed them to be. So we're coming here, and it's what you said, adapting to our structure, to the Western society, but keeping the parts of our monastic life and of Buddhist life that are really relevant no matter where you live and what society you're from.
There is a thing I would like to tell you related to this, but first of all, I would like to listen Carola.
Yeah.
Thank you for giving me the chance again. I mean, actually, I want to underline that actually, it's really nice to see that you think that Tibetan Buddhism is more structured than other traditions. But if you really look into it, actually, for example, there is no place for fully ordained nuns, because in Tibetan history, it's really long time ago that they had fully ordained nuns ordained by monks only, but they were never really completely accepted. And this is many centuries back and not in the memory of the people today. Yeah. And then, as the Venerable mentioned, Western monks and nuns and lay people are not included in the structure when they meet for their annual meetings to make decisions on the development of Buddhism, even if it is on women and women's education and nuns' education and nuns' ordination. They are not included. It's male only, all the meetings, no women there. Mm-hmm. And we have no voice. Also, the Tibetan nuns have no voice, And then, when we talk, I think the Venerable Thubten Chodron is also engaged in interfaith dialogue, monastic interfaith dialogue, And from what I heard, you are more experienced, but what I heard here in Europe is that actually the monasteries, and nunneries in a Christian, they are usually not supported by the church, and they don't get any share of the church taxes and so on. So, I don't know how it is in Spain, but according to what I have learned, this does not exist. And then, this question whether the Dalai Lama is comparable to a pope or not, I'm not sure I completely agree on this. I think with reference to Tibetan Buddhism, he has a kind of, he is the spiritual head of Tibetan Buddhism still. He has given up being the worldly head. He's not involved in politics anymore, but spiritually still the Tibetans feel that they need him as a leading figure for Tibetan Buddhism, but he doesn't have the say as the Vatican and the Pope has, Yeah. I know at our university, if a decision is made whether Catholic Church is sharing and teaching all students in public schools in one class religion, whether they have to separate or whether they engage doing it together, even if here in Hamburg they want to engage, and now they have actually got the permission to do so, but for many years they were not able to join to teach in school classes, school children religion together, but only separate because the Vatican didn't allow. And this kind of structure with all the bishops in between and with a clear legal, law, how to proceed and whose permission on what things and so on. In this way, Buddhism is not structured. The hierarchies are much more flat, not in this way. So, but I think it is really important for us here in the West, as the Venerable Chodron said. You can suffer from not being fully accepted and not fully included, but I see it also more and more now as an advantage, because they don't want to interfere. They give us the freedom they have shared with us the Dharma. They accepted us by giving ordination, giving the teaching, giving all the initiations, tantric initiations, the vows, the Bodhisattva vows, and so on. So we are in the lineage, you know, we know from whom we received what teaching and so on. But we don't need for permission and authorization from the tradition, but we can go on ourselves, and we have to figure out ourselves what qualifies us to do what, and what can we do under which conditions. And this is a process which will take some time, but it gives us it gives us room, you know, space to organize ourselves. And I think it's with the Buddhist to really start doing it. And therefore I'm sometimes a bit surprised when you read the short biographies of delegates in the German Buddhist Union, European Buddhist Union. Everybody stresses from whom he or she has been allowed to teach or not to teach, you know. And this is not the way how I experienced my tradition, you know. I mean, with these strict regulations. And I mean, in China, in Taiwan, when you take full ordination, you get a pass in which it says on which day you have been ordained, by whom, and so on. But then they also say it's just a piece of paper, and you prove it by your living and living according to it, and we will watch you whether you really do or not, you know. So it's different, and it gives us space.
I completely agree with you, Venerable Chodron, Carola, about that it can be an advantage. Okay, so what I was going to tell you is that, Carola, you know, is last summer I took a temporary full ordination in Myanmar, and I was there for 3 months. And I remember that one of the first days there, I could notice that nuns had to sit behind monks in the temple. Well, so I started to wonder about this, and I had a conversation with the abbot of the monastery, and I told him, Venerable, if we are in Spain, Spain is a Western country, as you know, and women have been fighting and asking for the rights since the 19th century. So we, as Buddhists, we cannot go now to Spain and say that inside the temple, nuns have to sit behind monks. Because it's going not to be accepted.
It's not, it won't work.
Of course, no, because our society is the way it is. And he told me, Ricardo, if this is the problem, you can do whatever you think is best. But of course, take it into account. You're going to be criticized, not for the monks, for the lay Buddhists in this country. He told me that, you know, that if we don't make some changes, is because the laity are going to judge us as bad monks. If we fit to the traditional Vinaya, we are going to be recognized as very good monks, and we're going to receive their support. Otherwise, they're going not to support us anymore. So I answered, okay, Venerable, as you can understand, I prefer to be criticized here in Myanmar than in Spain. In Spain, I would do what needed in order to adapt everything to our way of life, in order not to be criticized there, which is important. So, Carola, Venerable Chodron, if you find it an advantage, and you think that we should keep changing things in order to adapt to our society, to our way of life, I would say, let's go on. But let's go on 2, 3, or 100 steps forward. So maybe it's time to start to live speaking about Zen, about Pure Land, about Chan, about Tibetan, about whatever, and let's speak about Buddhism in our countries. let's make what needed to approach each other. And let's start or try to do whatever needed to show to the Western audience as a whole, as a family, as the same thing, not as separate things with separate traditions, with separate practices.
How about having separate traditions and some separate practices, but also being able to come together and present a unified front?
Yeah, well, of
so
course,
instead
this is
of
the first
making
step.
it either or, make it both and. Yeah. One thing, you know, that affects, I think, the Theravada structure is, you know, how you will be criticized by the laity in Asia. The laity gives the support, and with the Theravada monasteries in the West, as you mentioned before, they're supported primarily by Asians, and that keeps you bound to their cultural ways of doing things. So we have to import Buddhism and the Buddhist teachings, but the cultural ways of doing things, I think we have to set up in the West, which means instead of relying on Asian support, to rely on everybody's support. Because one thing that Venerable Jampa mentioned, you know, in terms of our not being accepted, is the Tibetans don't support the Western monasteries, you know, and the Western Dharma centers. So we have to open more to society and, you know, and fit in with the society, keeping the purity of the Dharma, but adapting the external things that are cultural.
Yes. So
And
finally, Venerable, as I'm going to be criticized by Asians, by the laity in Asia, I prefer, or I expect to receive support from my friends or from my brothers and sisters, Tibetan or whoever in the West.
Well, how about just Buddhists in the West?
Well, first of all, if I want to open a Theravada center in Spain, I have to stand by the Thai families, Burmese families, or few Sri Lankan families who live here. After that, little by little, Spanish people will approach if they have the opportunity to have a direct relationship with the monk. For that, the monk has to be an educated monk, knowing Spanish, knowing our culture, knowing our history, and so on. And this is also very difficult.
Right. And how about having some Spanish monks?
We don't have Spanish monks. We don't have Spanish Theravada
There's no
monks.
Theravada Spanish monks?
No, not at all. We,
Really?
for years, we have been following Venerable Nandisena, who is living in Mexico. But of course, Venerable Nandisena is aging now, and he cannot travel so often as he used to do. And we also have two more masters to whom we follow, Venerable Dhammasami in Oxford and Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi in New York, as you know. There are no Spanish-speaking Theravada masters.
Really?
This is the truth.
Oh. And what about the Achan Cha people? Do they have Spanish?
No,
No.
they only have a center in Portugal, not in Spain.
Oh, okay. Oh, I didn't know
I have been
that.
insisting in the West, in Thailand or in Sri Lanka, in Myanmar for years that you must educate and prepare monks in order to send them to the West, because we need monks to follow. We need ethical examples to follow, because otherwise nobody never is going to wake up one morning deciding to become a monk if they don't have examples, if they don't have models to follow.
But now maybe is your chance
Well, I've no, well, I've been a monk for a temporary monk, but my family duties don't allow me to do that. Of course, if I had the chance, you can be sure, Venerable, that I would do it.
Mm.
I like to mention something, you know, because you spoke about the supporting each other, and it just reminded me, you know, that when I was organizing this International Buddhist Congress of Buddhist women's role in the Sangha, I felt extremely supported by the Theravadin bhikkhus, you know, like Bhikkhu Bodhi, Bhikkhu Sujato, Bhikkhu Analayo, and so on. But there was no support from Western monks in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, because they were afraid that their teachers may get angry with them, you know, and they didn't want to risk their relationship with their Tibetan teachers, you know. So I mean, since then, I think when it comes to monks, I have more relation now with Theravadin monks than with Tibetan monks, you know, because of this. I mean, we are very close in this way of thinking and approach how to adapt Buddhism to the West. And I also thought about Atisha and the Lamrim, you know, when Buddhism came quite late to Tibet, from the 7th century onwards, and then the second wave in the 11th century. I mean, it was interesting that he taught the Lamrim is the stages on the path, how to get the different traditions which look contradictory, how to show that they all don't conflict with each other, that you can easily combine them, and how to, I mean, you know, they had these staircases of that you have to practice the Shravakayana as a basis with all the ethics and so on. And then comes the general Bodhisattva path, as it is also practiced with all the Mahayana sutras in East Asia. And then you can add, in addition, the Tantric path, but you don't have to, you know, according to your own competences and interest and trust and so on. And I mean, they again brought in a kind of hierarchy, which I don't agree with, but they found a way for that time in Tibet how to get it together, how to fit it together. And I think here in the, I mean, as you know, I was working for 5 years in a project at the Academy of World Religions, Religion and Dialogue in Modern Societies. And there we developed something we call dialogical theology. Means it's a theology done by the different, also Buddhist theology, and don't worry about the theo in it, you know, and I know it's a bit strange, but just to understand its practitioners, not just scholars from outside, but academics who are also practitioners of the religions and who are academics and who are working together in a dialogical way by respecting the different traditions as they are, you know, and but then get into dialogue with each other and develop something that goes beyond it, you know, that makes a roof for all, that all fit within, you know, and so not to make a competition, who has the better religion and who is better on this or that, you know, but just try to see what do we have in common, and to understand that differences can be very challenging for everybody to get into dialogue with each other, and then it's beneficial also for you to understand your own religion better. And this would also work in an intra-Buddhist context, you know, not only interreligiously, but also for dialogue among the Buddhists. And I think this is the way, I mean, also Islam is now doing this, because they have the same situation. They have all these different traditions of Islam in one country, in each country of Europe, you know, and they have to see how they work together, because, I mean, they cannot have all these different churches, you know, with all the different traditions. Somehow they have to cooperate. And I think this is because of the external structure. Also internally, Buddhism will change. I'm very sure it has already started. And we have to take on the responsibility, but this is a huge task. And we will not be able to discuss this further today, I'm afraid. And when I watch the time, I think we have done 1.5 hours. If you want to continue, we can continue, but maybe it's also some last sentence.
I just wanted to say that I completely agree with you. You know that in our meetings at European Buddhist Union every year, we insist that a part of the interreligious dialogue, our real challenge is the intra-Buddhist dialogue. We have to speak much more between us in order to, for instance, in this case, to have a common answer for the coronavirus crisis.
Yes.
That's it.
I really recommend the book that Venerable Jampa mentioned, His Holiness's book called Buddhism, One Teacher, Many Traditions, because it really focuses on the commonalities between the traditions, and also how on one point the traditions may see that point differently, but it doesn't mean that the viewpoints are contradictory at all. Yeah. So I really encourage you to read that.
Okay. Thank you very much, Carola, Venerable Chodron. It's been a real pleasure.
You too. It was nice to meet you again. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and I wish you well, Ricardo, that you may set up a Theravada monastery and have Spanish monks and nuns.
I hope so. Of course.
Okay.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And all my greetings to the nuns in Shravasti Abbey, please.
Okay, and I'm sure everybody sends you their love too. It's good.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.